And Katie Wilson, who has won the Seattle mayoral race, pending a recount, but the recount won't change anything, went on breaking points.
So I am super excited to
We,
talk
we, we already know that she's down to talk to controversial internet political figures.
to our next guest this morning. Katie Wilson is the co-founder and executive director of the Transit Riders Union. She is also the progressive candidate for mayor in the city of Seattle, locked in an extraordinarily close race with the current.
Okay, so this was recorded before yesterday's drop. I'm taking it then.
Current mayor Bruce Harrell, and she joins us now. Welcome, Katie.
Great to be here, Crystal.
Yeah, of course. So I've been following your race for the past couple of weeks. There's the incumbent who's more, I think, politically centrist. You're more the progressive, kind of insurgent, outsider candidate coming in. Very close race all the way along. And as of yesterday, based on the mail drops, you have now taken a 91 vote lead. So first question for you, just give us a little bit of a sense of the dynamics of this race, what ballots still remain, and whether your expectation is that you will be the next mayor of the city of Seattle.
Yeah, so the way that we do elections here in Washington State is that it's all by mail. So everyone mails in their ballots. We also have ballot drop boxes around the city. And there's a very consistent pattern that more progressive voters, younger voters, tend to vote late. And so what you'll see is that the election night results, there's actually a fairly large shift between election night and the final results toward the more progressive or left-leaning candidate. So on election night, I was at 46%. Now I've pulled ahead by 91 votes, as you said, and there's another about 10,000 ballots out there still to be counted, mostly from election day, mostly skewing.
But again, this is older. She's won.
So we're really hopeful that that margin will
widen.
Why
is she in the Philippines?
It's possible that there will
Good
be
question.
a recount because the margin will still be very small, but we're feeling really good about this race at this point.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. So talk to us just a little bit for people who have not been following this race closely. As I confess, I actually wasn't until the last couple of weeks before the election. Tell people about the incumbent mayor, Bruce Harrell, your issues with his leadership, and then the platform that you were running on as a contrast.
Yeah, sure thing. So, I mean, my background, I'm a community organizer, a coalition builder. And so for the past 14 years, I've been leading this organization that I co-founded back in 2011 called the Transit Riders Union. And, we basically fight on economic justice issues. So I've led campaigns to raise the minimum wage to the highest in the country in several cities around King County, fought for stronger renter protections in Seattle and other cities around King County, fought for progressive taxation. So we have a landmark tax on wealthy corporations in Seattle called the Jumpstart tax that I played a big role in designing and passing. And then, of course, public transit, right, as the name of the organization suggests, fighting for better public transit. And we've won a bunch of affordable and free fare programs for lower income riders, for youth. So that's the kind of work that I've done over the years. It's very grassroots.
She's been on it for ages.
It's community organizing, coalition building. And I really have never had the ambition to run for elected office until this year. And so early this year, we had an election on funding Seattle's new social housing developer through a tax on wealthy corporations. And our current mayor, Bruce Harrell, was kind of the face of the opposition campaign. And he's done a lot in office to try to undermine social housing, which is a kind of a new project for Seattle that a grassroots campaign put on the ballot last year. And nevertheless, this funding measure to fund the developer passed by a landslide. And so that really showed me that our current mayor, Bruce Harrell, is out of touch with the issues that people are facing in their daily lives. And I think the affordability crisis is really right up there at the top. And, when I jumped into this race, I'd never heard of Zohran Mamdani, but it's very clear that there are some similar dynamics playing out across the country where coming out of the pandemic with really high rates of inflation, the cost of housing in high-cost cities like Seattle is just really out of control. Rents just keep going up and up. Home prices are out of reach for anyone wanting to buy a home. And then everything else, from childcare to food to groceries, everything is just really, really expensive. And people are feeling that, right? Not just the lowest income households, but people up to kind of middle class, people who have decent jobs are just like, can't believe how expensive everything is. So I think that's definitely a dynamic in this race where the work that I've done over the years and what I want to tackle as mayor is this affordability crisis.
Is she taking a breath?
And really, we also have this extremely bad homelessness crisis here in Seattle. We actually have rates of unsheltered homelessness that are much higher than comparable cities around the country in the U.S. And I really, our current mayor, Bruce Harrell, he came into office promising to address issues of homelessness and public safety. And I think people are looking around and not really feeling that he's succeeded at that. So that's kind of a local dynamic, but the national dynamic is affordability. And then I think also, obviously, Trump getting elected last fall, right? There's a certain brand of establishment Democratic Party politics, which utterly failed to stop the train wreck that was Trump's election. And so I think that there's a feeling that people want new leadership and leadership that's
she's gotten a lot more charismatic since she first started her campaign. But no, she's a policy wonk 100%. I'm interested. The main thing, like, again, the ability for a policy wonk to get what they need to get done is making sure you have the mandate. You need support, you need shooters. And I really, really hope that, I mean, she's won, she's going to win, she's going to be sworn in. I really hope that she is a team that is able to build on that attention,
That's not going to cower like that.
Seattle's not that big. The population of Seattle is about 800,000. Not the broader metropolitan area, but the city of Seattle itself, about 800,000, which is about the same as San Francisco or Portland. It's about the same population. And there's a disproportionate amount of wealth. Seattle's quite wealthy, for its population relative to other comparably sized cities. There's a lot to do here,
Our current mayor, he doesn't
is
break
that not big? Yeah, it's,
right. Like
it's a big city, but it's not colossal, right? It's not Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, whatever.
He's been the mayor for 4 years, but before that, he was a council member for 12
Houston.
years. So he's kind of part of that kind of centrist Democratic Party establishment that people are pretty upset with right now. So I think that's also a dynamic in this race. And so for me, coming in as an outsider, someone who's worked with City Hall, is familiar with the legislative process and all that, but at the same time is coming in as kind of an insurgent candidate. This was just the right moment for that to work, and it looks like we're going to pull it out by the skin of our teeth.
Incredible. I'd love for you to dig a little bit more into the contrast in the approach of Bruce Harrell on homelessness versus, what approach did he take and what did you run on?
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, this is something that I didn't have super high expectations.
Seattle's by far the biggest metro area in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, the big that is something that makes Seattle unique, is its location, right? If you take a look at a map of highly populated U.S. cities, you can see that there's no other city like Seattle that is highly populated but also totally isolated, right? Like LA and New York have nearby peers. Seattle's pretty much the regional, power, so to speak.
When he came into office, kind of knowing who he was from when he was on council, but I've been deeply disappointed relative to those expectations. So basically, the current administration's approach has been to sweep people around the city from place to place without actually getting people inside. So we basically have thousands of people sleeping unsheltered on the streets, and we have 2 homeless people in the Seattle area for every 1 shelter bed. And there's been very, very little focus of his administration on actually opening new emergency housing and shelters so that we can get people inside. Instead, they're spending all of this time and energy just basically telling people you can't be here and forcing them to move along. But then, where are they supposed to go, right? And so that also contributes to our public safety problems, right? Because a lot of people have issues with drug addiction, mental illness, and those aren't being dealt with. And you can't really deal with those issues if you're sleeping out.
It's so up that, especially since COVID, basically the number one urban decay indicator / problem that people are concerned with regard to what can be done at a municipal level is, hey, our lack of a social safety net and our austerity policies have created an underclass of mentally ill, drug addicted, homeless people, and they're now menacing us and they're scary. And we don't care about anything else. If you can deal with that, that's all we need, Unbelievable.
Side. And so the fact that they're not actually focusing on getting people inside is just really damning in my mind. And people are noticing it, right? There's people who just residents, small business owners in various neighborhoods around the city who, they see that there's an encampment there, and they know that they're okay, well, the city's going to come and sweep them, but we know that they're just going to go to the next neighborhood, and then a couple of weeks from now they'll be back. And so there's this deep frustration with this approach. So what I've been saying on the campaign trail is I'm going to really focus on opening new emergency housing and shelters so that we can actually resolve encampments by getting people inside rather than just sweeping them around the city. And we know that this works, right? So during the pandemic, there was a program that several nonprofits put together called Just Care, which basically did that, right? Resolved encampments by getting people inside. And at that time, it was kind of temporary hotels that had been repurposed as shelter. And it was very successful. So we know.
What about Spokane? Is that a joke? Is that supposed to be like a Seattle joke? You know what I mean? Like like a New Yorker might be like, there are no other cities nearby that compete with us in culture and power. What about Hoboken? Oh, like that kind of thing.
That the vast majority of homeless folks sleeping outside will accept meaningful offers of shelter and support when that's given to them. And that's just not what we're doing right now. So that's really the big difference in our approach there.
And what do you do with the more challenging cases, people who are suffering from addiction issues or from mental illness who don't want to accept that, that offer of shelter? How do you handle those cases?
Into the blender.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know from practice that ends up being a fairly small percentage of
we send them to
population.
Bellevue.
But, the fact is we do have levers, right? So, our laws around involuntary commitment are governed at the state level. So changing those is pretty challenging. But here's the thing, like most people who are addicted to drugs, are also engaged in various forms of criminal behavior, right, in order to obtain drugs or just in order to meet basic needs. The homeless people, that is, right? And so we have the ability to, if necessary, arrest people for criminal behavior. And then we have successful diversion programs because we also know that just throwing someone in jail doesn't work, right? And then they're back out on the street. And
I hope she supports clean needle policies. I'm pretty sure she does.
Stabilized and are more at risk of overdosing. But what we can do is put people into a diversion program where there's basically accountability and there's shelter and services, but that's kind of like offered as an alternative to the booking and jail kind of route. And so we have programs that have been very successful, and so it's a matter of scaling those up. And I think that we can, if we do that well, I think that we can address those tougher cases, or the vast majority of them as well.
And of course, chronic homelessness is a symptom of a larger housing crisis, as you were speaking to, which affects absolutely everyone. What are some of the, obviously, we all know the Zoran platform, he's freezing the rent on rent stabilized apartments, and then he wants to surge a building bonanza of additional 200,000 housing units. What are some of the things you ran on in terms of housing affordability? Because I know that
Seattle should just decommodify housing. I want more of those tiny villages, man. Got a couple of them. I don't know if they're like more common in Seattle than in other places, or if they're actually pretty common everywhere and I've only noticed them here, but we have cute little tiny home villages. Basically, they get a property, right? Like a lot, and they put up a big fence around it so you can't look in. And then rather than have one big single family home here, they put a bunch of basically, Home Depot sheds in there. I believe it's communal bathrooms. It's basically just a one room, like a bedroom, But you've got your own mailing address now. You've got your own lockbox, all that stuff. I think they're pretty good. I've heard people speak positively about them. Why not just make an apartment complex at this point? Well, because that would be a lot more expensive. The point is that this is supposed to be temporary housing to help people get back on their feet, not like a long-term place to live. Yeah, cheap, modular, scalable. You could get a lot of these, There's that one on Jackson or Yesler, I think. Yesler, not Jackson. They're not too bad. Look, all these ones have AC units, which my house doesn't have an AC unit. Big in Portland near the airport. Oh. People's sheds are kinds of dystopian. A little bit, I guess. But, it's a practical way of dealing with a real problem. Also, I think they're cute, They get decorated and stuff. See? I mean, these are pretty clearly getting treated well. People here like it.
that is a major issue in the city of Seattle.
Yeah, totally. So there's a few things. So one is social housing, which I mentioned, right? And this is a model which is a little bit unfamiliar in Seattle and a lot of the United States, but similar to Vienna and Paris and other European cities, which have had really strong social housing sectors for a long time. And so the idea here is to begin to build a non-market housing sector that's mixed income. So here in Seattle would go up to 120% of area median income, which is a fairly high threshold.
Why do Americans have AC? Just open the window if you're too hot. Classic Germanic opinion right there. Thank you. Thank you for your insight. There's a reason why so many of you Europeans die in heat waves and we don't, even though our country is considerably hotter on average.
And then by having this like publicly owned and operated permanently affordable housing, once you get that to a certain scale, that also helps to moderate rents in the private sector. Now we're a long way from that, but there's no better time to start than now. So part of my platform is really having the city and the mayor be a strong partner in getting the new social housing developer up and rolling and acquiring buildings and developing buildings. At the same time, I also believe that we need to make it possible for the private market to build more housing in our great neighborhoods around Seattle. And so that means working on our land use and zoning laws to make that possible. Because
you'd be dying of heat waves in Europe. You want to know how bad it is? European heat wave caused, just Google European heat wave death. As many as 61,000 people may have died in Europe's sweltering heat waves. In, wait, over what length of time? The thing cut off. In 2022. Jesus Christ. 23,000 people died of heat-related causes across 12 European cities in one heat wave this year. It's not good. It's not good. Heat claims more than 175,000 lives annually in Europe, according to the UN News. 175,000. Yeah, AC is good. AC is good. Let's check America. American deaths heat wave. And we'll adjust for population. Don't worry. Don't worry. Around 1,300. Oh, in 2023, the record high was 2,300 heat-related fatalities. So considering the fact the population of America is about 1/4 that of Europe, we're still lapping you guys. And we have some areas that are a lot hotter than Europe. Very humid along the East Coast. Very, very hot along much of the South. Basically, what I'm saying is, yeah, get some AC units. God, can you imagine how expensive power would be in Europe if they had AC? That'd be insane. You people would be you'd be paying more on that than rent. Jesus Christ. Well, shouldn't have had Germany take down all their fucking nuclear power plants.
We have had very restrictive single-family zoning laws in Seattle for a long time, and that's beginning to loosen up a little bit, but we can go a lot further than the previous administration has gone. In addition, so we are not allowed in local jurisdictions in Washington state to do rent regulation directly, so we can't do rent control here locally without a change in state law. However, we do have a law called the Economic Displacement Relocation Assistance Law, which basically says if your landlord raises your rent 10% or more and you move out because you can't afford it, your landlord is supposed to pay you 3 times your monthly rent in relocation assistance.
Well,
that's nice. And it also disincentivizes large rent increases because landlords don't want to trigger that law. And so one thing that I've talked about is bumping that threshold down from 10% to, for example, 5%. And so that would help to disincentivize those larger rent increases. There's some other things that we can do on the renter protections front, like regulating or banning rental junk fees, something that happens, especially if you have a corporate landlord in the United States. There's kind of the sticker price of your apartment, but then there's all these like hidden monthly fees or hidden annual fees that are kind of in the fine print. And so you end up paying a lot more than you think you were going to pay. So something that the city can do is also regulate or ban some of those kind of extraneous fees. So those are a couple of other ideas for how we can like help around the margins.
Has she
the city can do more
yet?
to invest in affordable homeownership programs. There's some other things too, but it's kind of a whole range of things, right? There's not one silver bullet, but we kind of need to do it all.
All of the above. Yeah. Katie, my last question for you is, I'd love for you to zoom out and talk a little bit more broadly about the political trends within Seattle. I saw a tweet about this, so forgive me, you can correct if this tweet analysis was incorrect. But basically they said, there were a lot of progressive legislators in Seattle. And then there was, after Black Lives Matter and the pandemic, there was kind of a backlash. And that's when people like Bruce Harrell and other more like centrist types get elected to the city council. And now with Harrell's likely defeat.
Yeah, I think, unironically, I think the CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, negatively polarized a lot of Seattleites against. It makes me wonder, like, how I would have handled it. Now that I'm more knowledgeable than I was 4 or 5 years ago, I wondered how I would feel about that now. Because it was always really dumb. But I was happy at the time that the mayor didn't crack down on it. I wonder if it would have been better for that to have happened.
That wave of the backlash wave has now been swept out by a more progressive cohort. And so first of all, is that sort of accurate, your view of the way that Seattle politics has swung back and forth? And then what is most important to you in order to make sure that there isn't another sort of backlash swing to the center after your mayoralty?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so, yeah, I think the picture that you laid out is fairly accurate. So we had a pretty darn progressive city council for about a decade. And that included former council member Shama Sawant, who is, a socialist city council member. And now, one thing to note, though, is that during that time when we had a very progressive council, we had pretty centrist mayors. And so that really, that dynamic kind of.
You mean the Anarchist Project in Seattle? Yeah, it was the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone by Cal Anderson Park, where for a while, like for a long while, a bunch of gay people barricaded off the street during BLM and acted as though they had created a state within a state. Was it based? Not really. It was basically just like an ongoing block party. It was extremely LARPy, more so than anything else. That's the main thing you're getting from that. It was very, very LARPy. But there were people there, like, just a lot of really embarrassing stuff. Like they put up barricades, and then there were people at Chaz putting out social media posts saying, "We need people to bring us pizza now. People are starving in here." And inevitably, because it was like a lawless corridor, a bunch of homeless people just ended up moving their encampments there. That kind of stuff, you know? And then apparently there was a warlord, and I think someone got shot. I don't know. They might have just called him a warlord because he was black. You know how it is. I think it was specifically a black Maoist. Isn't it always? Also, they were just really, really unserious. CHOP protesters, it's also called CHOP, Chaz, whatever, had demanded a 50% reduction of SPD's budget for 2020 and 2021. Okay. Man, 7 of 9 city council members supported the reduction. That's crazy. What do you think would have happened if that went through? A 50% reduction in police budget in one year, one fiscal period is insane and unsustainable. Cutting any department by that many people is just going to cause problems. You're going to have a fuck ton of people taken off the staff. They're going to be really begrudging. They're going to be like media nightmares for the rest of their lives. Every single crime that happens is going to be blamed on the reduction in budget. That's too much, You have to be a little more procedural with something like that. You are dealing with a bureaucracy after all. Protesters established the No Cop Co-op on June 9th, offering free water, hand sanitizer, kebabs, and snacks donated by the community. Vegan curry, others collected donations for the homeless. The Seattle Times reported that restaurant owners in the area had an uptick in walk-in business. That is true. There's no evidence that the lawless zone turned into like urban decay or whatever. Like, for the most part, it was just a block party. Did you visit Chaz? No, I was worried I'd get recognized by too many people and mauled to death. Shootings. Well, what matters is that the people had fun.
Cramped the council's style in a sense in terms of their ability to get things not just passed but really implemented well. And then yes, after 2020 and Black Lives Matter, there was a backlash, and so then we had actually our current mayor elected and a very for Seattle, very, very centrist or right-leaning compared to usual city council. So this year, with hopefully my election, but then also a couple of council members and a new city attorney.
They would have made him king of the anarchists? Dog, they would have executed me. Are you kidding me? Somebody earlier, especially at the time, a Maoist would have disemboweled Vaush. Where was that chat? Yeah, Chaz was very VDS coded. That's a very online thing to say, but you're also completely correct, okay? I'm pretty sure they would have bolstered the movement by executing me in the middle of Cal Anderson Park.
Are swinging back in a progressive direction. Now we have kind of staggered elections. So this year there was only, for complicated reasons, 3, but normally there would be 2 at-large council positions up for election. So there's 7 district council elections seats, which will be up for election in 2 years. So right now, assuming that I win this race, right, we'll have me in the mayor's office, and we'll have several very progressive council members, but the bulk of, we don't have a strong progressive majority on the council yet, but that could happen in 2027. Now, in order for that to happen in 2027, you asked about kind of what needs to be accomplished in the next couple of years. I really think that I have a lot of ambitious progressive policy dreams in my platform. But I really think what I'm going to be judged on, what my administration is going to be judged on first and foremost, is homelessness and public safety. And I really think that in the first couple of years, we're going to need to drill down and make.
It sucks so much that this is the metric by which everyone has to be judged now. You know, there are so many problems, and this is always the one people hem in on first.
Progress on those really basic quality of life issues, and show, I think we have an opportunity here for people on the progressive left to basically show that we can actually govern. And so there's going to be, I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to the work that needs to happen to basically get City Hall, the city bureaucracy, moving in a good direction, actually delivering services for the people of Seattle, and hopefully pioneering a new model of kind of responsive government and communication with the people, where we're really explaining what we're doing and why, and if we're coming up against obstacles, here's why. And I think this is a similar challenge that I think Mamdani is going to face in New York City, where there's a lot of really ambitious things that we want to get done, but there's also real obstacles, right? It's like the reason why these things haven't been done is complicated, and there's really entrenched interests that are going to fight against it. And so we're going to need to be able to tell a story of the things that we're fighting for, the progress that we're making, but also the reason why it's not moving faster, right? So that's going to be big. And, I mean, like, I'm in this race, right? There was more corporate PAC spending against me than has ever been spent in a Seattle race against a candidate. And a lot of those same interests are also going to want to undermine my administration. And so I'm going into this with, I think, clear-eyed about the challenges, the political challenges, as well as the practical challenges of implementing my agenda.
Nothing about Bellevue.
And I mean, it's going to be a massive challenge, but I'm really excited about it as well.
Well, Katie, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're probably like super busy right now and really in the thick of things. I won't say congratulations yet because I don't want to jinx the result, but I'm very excited to see what you.
The Seattle WA subreddit, so weirdly anti-Katie. The Seattle Washington subreddit is like the more conservative. Okay, basically, the Seattle subreddit is mostly occupied by people who live in Seattle, and the Seattle Washington subreddit is mostly occupied by people who live in Bellevue who are mad at how progressive the people who live in Seattle are. Just calling it, okay? The Seattle Washington subreddit is like the more annoying exurb community. Are they whining about Katie Wilson? Some people in there blamed you too? Nice. Can't stand the, can't stop the Vaush bump, the vump. I think people in the main sub were pretty happy. Call you for not voting. From Ballard. Nice. Rip Ballard Commons Park. Rip all Seattle parks and our wallets as taxes get raised to be pissed away on feelings. From Cap Hill 2000. I don't think you actually live on Cap Hill, man. I don't think you actually live on Cap Hill. I don't think you do. I don't. Well, actually, a lot of people who live in Cap Hill live around Volunteer Park. And Volunteer Park, that area, you got some super mansions up there. All you need to do to win an election is be the furthest left candidate. Yeah, that happened back in 2021. This is Seattle. We doubled down on bad ideas because we didn't like the bad idea hard enough for it to work. Oh, from West Seattle. See, I'm telling you guys, it really is. It's the same problem you have with New York, where like a bunch of the people in New York are cool, and then you see people shitting on it, and then it turns out they're all from like New Jersey or whatever. But they consider themselves New Yorkers because they drive over there every day, you know? Exact same thing with Chicago. Yep. It's the broader, it's like a macro version of the problem with suburbs. Time to undo all progress. Let's start with Cal Anderson and then Ballard Library. We need to stand up 500 tents immediately there. Where does Katie live? Let's start there. I despise conservatives, man. They really are like not human the way that we're human. They're so vindictive and they have no creative imagination for a better world. Like it's always to them and us versus them. It's always a zero-sum game, slice of the pie. I get what's mine. I deserve what's mine. Everyone else, them, you know? I really do hate these people. This place is a nightmare, Lamau. Jesus Christ. Imagine being that threatened by Katie Wilson. Katie Wilson is like the most unthreatening human being alive. I'm a Democrat and I'm sick to my stomach. Somebody who had zero real-life experience is about to be mayor of one of the country's economic powerhouses. How stupid can we be? She's the left's version of Trump. Found Schumer's Reddit account. They really do think the only way to qualify as mayor is being a CEO? Well, if that's the case, that person would have liked Trump, right? Technocratic bullshit. Since you live in Seattle, how representative of life there are these comments? They aren't. If you actually go out and have fun and spend time in Seattle, overwhelmingly, there's like tons of openly progressive, gay, lefty, trans, whatever people, you know? I mean, unless the only places you're hanging out are like Bellevue, West Seattle, like basically all the places worth going to in Seattle are good. Okay, these people are mostly ass mad Gen Xers or boomers or people who live in exurb regions. You know, suburbanoids.